The mountain air bit at Olivia's cheeks as she adjusted the massive telescope. At 34, she had finally secured her position as lead researcher at the prestigious Callaway Observatory. Yet tonight she felt more like an excited graduate student than a decorated astrophysicist. The meteor shower predicted for the evening promised to deliver rare spectral signatures she'd been hunting for years. "Excuse me, is this area restricted?" Olivia turned to find a man framed in the doorway, camera equipment hanging from his broad shoulders. The observatory's dome lighting cast interesting shadows across his face, highlighting sharp cheekbones and curious eyes. "Technically, yes," she replied, pushing her copper hair back into its loose bun. "But I'm guessing you're the photographer from National Geographic." His smile revealed a slight dimple on his left cheek. "Jackson Merritt. They sent me to capture the meteor shower for their celestial events series." "Dr. Olivia Winters." She extended her hand, feeling an unexpected spark when their fingers met. "I was told to expect you, though not quite this early." "I like to scout locations before the light changes." Jackson set his equipment down carefully. "Mind if I look around?" For the next hour, Olivia found herself increasingly distracted by Jackson's presence. He moved with deliberate grace, framing shots with his hands before ever touching his camera. Unlike most visitors who treated the observatory as merely a tourist attraction, he seemed to genuinely appreciate the science happening around him. "So you're leaving for Chile next week?" Jackson asked while adjusting his lens. "Sounds exciting." 18 months at the ALMA array, Olivia confirmed, trying to hide her mixed feelings. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime professionally, but personally." Their eyes met across the room, and Olivia felt something shift in the atmosphere between them. "Personally, it's 18 months in one of the most isolated research facilities on Earth." As night fell and the first meteors began streaking across the sky, they worked in tandem, Olivia collecting data while Jackson captured long-exposure photographs. The small dome became an intimate space, their conversations flowing effortlessly between professional observations and personal revelations. "Beautiful," Jackson whispered, as a particularly bright meteor cut across the constellation Cassiopeia. Olivia glanced over to find him looking not at the sky, but at her. Heat rushed to her face. "You're missing your shot." "I'm not so sure about that," he replied softly. The research forgotten, Olivia found herself drawn to him. Later, she would blame the altitude, the excitement of the meteor shower, or the knowledge that she was leaving soon anyway. But in that moment when Jackson gently touched her face, all rationalizations evaporated. "We shouldn't," she murmured, even as she leaned closer. "Probably not," he agreed, his breath warm against her lips. "Tell me to stop." Instead, Olivia closed the distance between them, her mouth finding his in the darkness. The kiss deepened as Jackson's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him. The observatory's equipment hummed around them, automatic cameras capturing the celestial show while they created their own gravity. His hands tangled in her hair, releasing it from its confines as Olivia led him to the small office adjacent to the main dome. Under the glow of emergency lights, they slowly undressed each other, each touch an exploration, each kiss a discovery. "Are you sure?" Jackson asked, his voice husky with restraint. Olivia nodded, pulling him down onto the narrow cot kept for overnight observations. "I leave in 6 days. Let's not waste tonight on doubts." Their bodies moved together with increasing urgency, the cool air of the mountain observatory forgotten as they generated their own heat. Outside, meteors continued their fiery descent through the atmosphere, mirroring the intensity building between them. In the afterglow, tangled in the observatory's spare blankets, Olivia traced the contours of Jackson's face. "This is madness," she whispered. "We barely know each other." Jackson captured her wandering fingers, kissing each tip gently. "Sometimes the universe has its own timeline, but I understand Chile awaits." Olivia rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat while calculating the improbability of their encounter. Like two distant celestial bodies, briefly sharing an orbit before continuing on separate trajectories across the vastness of space. 6 months into her research assignment in Chile, Olivia's eyes burned from staring at computer screens filled with spectral data. The Atacama Observatory provided unparalleled views of the cosmos, but the isolation was taking its toll. Her small living quarters felt more like a prison than a home, despite the breathtaking starscape visible through her window each night. She reached for her phone, scrolling through photos until she found the one she sought, Jackson, silhouetted against the observatory dome back home. One night. That's all they'd shared, yet thoughts of him continued to distract her from her work. "Dr. Winters?" A colleague knocked at her door. "There's a photographer here from some wildlife magazine. Says he needs access to the Western Ridge for sunset shots." Olivia's heart stuttered. "Did you get a name?" Minutes later, she was hurrying across the compound, lab coat flapping behind her. She spotted him immediately. Jackson stood at the edge of the facility, his camera trained on a vicuña grazing near the security fence. The high-altitude wind tousled his dark hair, now slightly longer than she remembered. "Fancy meeting you here," she called out, trying to sound casual despite her racing pulse. He turned, surprise giving way to a slow smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I wondered if I'd run into you." "Liar," she laughed. "The Atacama Desert is 105,000 square kilometers. You knew exactly where to find me." Jackson lowered his camera. "I may have arranged this assignment specifically." That night, they shared dinner in the observatory's sparse cafeteria, their knees touching beneath the table as they caught up on the months apart. Jackson explained his 6-week assignment, photographing the unique wildlife that survived in the world's driest desert. 6 weeks, Olivia repeated, her throat tight. "That's quite a coincidence." "Is it?" Jackson reached across the table, his fingers interlacing with hers. "I couldn't stop thinking about you, Olivia." Later in her quarters, their reunion became more intimate. Clothes were discarded as they rediscovered each other's bodies, the chemistry between them even more potent than Olivia remembered. Jackson's photographer's hands mapped her skin with exquisite attention to detail, drawing out sensations that left her gasping his name into the thin mountain air. "The altitude," she murmured afterwards, her head resting on his shoulder. "It makes everything more intense." Jackson chuckled, his chest rumbling beneath her ear. "I don't think we can blame the altitude for this." In the weeks that followed, they established a rhythm. Days were spent on their separate work, but nights belonged to them alone. Olivia showed Jackson secret spots for capturing the desert's stark beauty, while he taught her photography basics, his arms wrapped around her from behind as he demonstrated proper framing techniques. Each goodbye at dawn grew more difficult as Olivia returned to her research, and Jackson ventured into the desert. The temporary nature of their arrangement hung over them like the Milky Way, beautiful, vast, and ultimately untouchable. "What happens when your assignment ends?" Olivia finally asked one evening as they lay entwined in her narrow bed. Jackson's hand paused its gentle stroking of her back. "I was hoping we could figure that out together." But time wasn't their only complication. Dr. Elliot, the project leader, had begun watching them with suspicious eyes, his disapproval evident in clipped comments about professional environments and compromised focus. "My research has to come first," Olivia insisted when Jackson suggested they be more open about their relationship. "This project determines my entire career trajectory." He nodded, though the shadow that crossed his face told her he wasn't convinced. As she turned back to her computer, Olivia wondered if the stars she'd dedicated her life to studying were worth the earthly connection she might be sacrificing. The Atacama nights belonged to them. During daylight hours, Olivia and Jackson maintained a careful distance, professional colleagues passing in hallways with nothing more than polite nods. But after sunset, when the first stars appeared over the desert, they would meet at prearranged locations beyond the facility's cameras. "This is getting ridiculous," Jackson whispered one night as they made love in the back of his rented Jeep, parked in a secluded canyon. The vehicle's windows had fogged from their passion, obscuring the spiral arm of the galaxy stretched overhead. "I feel like we're teenagers sneaking around." 3 more weeks, Olivia promised, tracing the contours of his face in the darkness. "Then your assignment ends and Dr. Elliot won't have reason to suspect anything." But their secret was already unraveling. Elena, Olivia's research assistant, had begun covering for her unexplained absences with increasing reluctance. "He knows something's going on," Elena warned during a calibration session. "Yesterday he asked me directly if you were seeing the photographer." Olivia adjusted the telescope settings, avoiding her colleague's concerned gaze. "What did you tell him?" "I lied, of course, but Olivia, is this worth risking everything you've worked for?" The question echoed in her mind that evening as she met Jackson at their favorite spot, a natural rock formation that provided shelter from the wind while offering an unobstructed view of the southern sky. He had prepared a small picnic, complete with contraband wines smuggled past facility security. "To the universe," Jackson toasted, "for bringing an astrophysicist and a wildlife photographer together in the middle of nowhere." Olivia clinked her plastic cup against his, studying the way starlight reflected in his eyes. "The universe may have started this, but we're the ones choosing to continue." Their kisses tasted of wine and desire, hands fumbling with clothing as familiar hunger built between them. Jackson laid her down on the blanket he'd brought, his body covering hers, protecting her from the chilly night air as they moved together. Their lovemaking had evolved from frantic exploration to something deeper, each touch conveying emotions neither dared voice aloud. Afterward, wrapped in the blanket and each other, they watched a satellite trace its path across the constellations. "I've been offered another assignment," Jackson said quietly. "In Argentina, it would start right after this one ends." Olivia felt her chest tighten. "How long?" "3 months. "That's not so far," she said, trying to sound optimistic. "We could meet somewhere on weekends, maybe. Or you could come with me." The words hung in the air between them. "Take a leave of absence just for a little while." Before she could respond, headlights swept the rocks around them. They scrambled for clothes as a facility vehicle approached, its high beams illuminating their hastily dressed figures. Dr. Elliot stepped out, his thin face taut with anger. "Dr. Winters, this is highly inappropriate conduct." "With all due respect, sir," Olivia replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "my personal life is my own business." "Not when it affects the project. Your distraction has been noted by the entire team." He glanced dismissively at Jackson. "Mr. Merritt, your photography clearance is revoked effective immediately." As the vehicle disappeared back toward the facility, Jackson pulled Olivia close. "Come with me to Argentina. Tonight, we'll figure out the rest later." She buried her face in his chest, torn between the career she'd spent a lifetime building and the man who had unexpectedly captured her heart beneath these very stars. The altitude sickness started as a dull headache that Olivia tried to ignore. At 5,000 meters above sea level, the Atacama Observatory's thin air challenged even the most acclimated researchers, but she had been pushing herself harder since her confrontation with Dr. Elliot. 16-hour workdays became her norm, partly to prove her dedication to the project, partly to avoid dwelling on Jackson's imminent departure. "You look terrible," Elena commented, sliding a cup of coca tea across the lab table. "When was the last time you slept?" Olivia accepted the traditional altitude remedy with shaking hands. "I'm fine. The new spectrometer data needs processing before the weekend." But she wasn't fine. 2 days after Dr. Elliot had discovered them, Jackson's special access had indeed been revoked, limiting him to the public areas of the facility. Their contact had dwindled to brief, tension-filled encounters in the cafeteria, always under watchful eyes. "This is killing me," Jackson had whispered during their last stolen moment in a supply closet. His lips brushed her ear, sending shivers down her spine despite her exhaustion. "I can't stand seeing you like this, Olivia. You're running yourself into the ground." She had silenced him with desperate kisses, unwilling to acknowledge the truth in his words. Now, as she squinted at blurring numbers on her screen, the room began to tilt. Olivia gripped the edge of her desk, struggling to remain upright as black spots danced across her vision. "Olivia," Elena's voice sounded distant. "Someone get the medic." She awoke in the facility's medical unit, an oxygen mask covering her face and an IV in her arm. Jackson sat beside her bed, his expression a mixture of relief and anger. "You're an idiot," he said when he noticed her open eyes. "Severe hypoxia, dehydration, and exhaustion. The doctor said you're lucky it wasn't worse." Olivia removed the mask with trembling fingers. "The research." "Can wait," Jackson's voice hardened. "Your body couldn't handle it, Olivia, but you begged me not to stop you from working yourself to death." "That's not fair," her eyes filled with tears. "This project is everything I've worked toward." "More important than your health, than us," he stood abruptly. "I watched my father kill himself for his career, heart attack at 48. I won't watch you do the same." The argument escalated as Olivia defended her choices, and Jackson insisted she was making herself ill for nothing. Their voices rose until a nurse intervened, ordering Jackson to leave. "Fine," he said, pausing at the door. "My assignment ends tomorrow anyway. I'll be on the morning transport to Calama, then a flight to Buenos Aires." He hesitated, his expression softening. "I love you, Olivia, enough to not stand by watching you destroy yourself." After he left, Olivia curled onto her side, tears streaming silently. The oxygen tank beside her bed hissed rhythmically, a mechanical substitute for the comforting sound of Jackson's breathing she had grown accustomed to. Dr. Elliot visited later that evening, his usual sternness tempered with concern. "You're one of our most promising researchers, Dr. Winters. Don't throw away your potential over a distraction." "He's not a distraction," Olivia whispered after her supervisor left. But the empty room offered no rebuttal to the choice that loomed before her. The stars that had guided her life's work, or the man who had shown her there was more to life than studying distant light. 3 weeks after Jackson's departure, Olivia stood on the observation platform watching technicians install the new spectral analyzer her team had been waiting for. Below, the Atacama Desert stretched endlessly, its rusty landscape broken only by the gleaming white dishes of the observatory array. "Dr. Elliot approved your request," Elena said, joining her at the railing. 4 weeks of personal leave starting Monday." Olivia nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The severe hypoxia episode had changed things. Her health had improved with reduced hours and proper medication, but something else had shifted inside her, a recalibration of priorities she hadn't expected. "Will you go to him?" Elena asked softly. "I don't even know if he'll want to see me." Olivia hadn't contacted Jackson since their argument, pride and uncertainty holding her back. "Our last conversation wasn't exactly friendly." But 48 hours later, she found herself in Buenos Aires, navigating through a crowded wildlife photography exhibition where Jackson's Atacama collection was being featured. Heart-pounding, she moved from image to image, vicuñas against sunset-painted mountains, native birds in flight, and then herself. The photograph stopped her cold. It showed her silhouette against the Milky Way, taken during one of their secret nights. Her face wasn't visible, just her outline and the stars beyond, but the intimacy of the moment was palpable. "It's called Astronomer's Dream," Jackson's voice came from behind her. "My favorite piece in the collection." Olivia turned slowly, drinking in the sight of him. He looked different in the city, tailored shirt replacing his usual field gear, hair neatly trimmed. But his eyes held the same intensity that had first drawn her to him on the mountain. "I took medical leave," she said before her courage faltered. 4 weeks, Dr. Elliot actually suggested it. Jackson stepped closer, and after those 4 weeks, "I've applied for a position at the National Observatory back home. They're building a new research center. The altitude is considerably lower." She attempted a smile. "Better for my health." "And us," his voice was careful, guarded. Olivia reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I've spent my career mapping celestial bodies, calculating orbits and trajectories, but I've never experienced anything like the gravity between us, Jackson." Later that evening, they stood on the balcony of his rented apartment, the city lights below a poor imitation of the star field they had shared in Chile. As Jackson's arms encircled her from behind, Olivia leaned into his warmth. "I've been thinking about what you said in the medical unit," she murmured, "about watching your father choose work over health over love." Jackson's embrace tightened. "I shouldn't have thrown that at you. Your work is important." "So is balance," she turned in his arms. "I don't want to choose between the stars and you, I want both." Their kiss deepened as clothing was discarded piece by piece, leaving them bare beneath the city's ambient glow. They moved to the bedroom, where their reunion became a physical affirmation of the commitment they were making. Each caress represented a promise, each shared breath a future envisioned together. "I've missed you," Jackson whispered as he moved above her, their bodies finding their familiar rhythm. "Every night I watched the same stars we shared, wondering if you were seeing them too." Afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, they mapped out possibilities. Jackson could establish a base near her new position, taking shorter assignments that would allow them to reunite regularly. Olivia could build her research schedule around their time together. "1 year from today," Olivia proposed, tracing patterns on his chest, "let's meet at the observatory where we first met." Jackson smiled, catching her wandering finger and bringing it to his lips. To watch the same meteor shower. To get married beneath it, she corrected, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. If you'll have me. His answer came not in words, but in the tender way he gathered her close, his heartbeat steady against her ear. A pulse as reliable as the cosmic rhythm she had dedicated her life to studying. And now, a new constellation forming between two people who had found each other beneath the vast Chilean sky.